Okay, I guess this is to me then. Hope everybody can see me. My name is Jason Ward. I am a USDA certified organic farmer. I've also been farming out there at Agraria for the past 4 years, and hopefully for as long as I'm able to farm. Um, so I guess we'll start out. I started the first year there. There was a cover crop in place. It had gone to seed, which was a bit of a struggle in itself, but I planted soybeans. They did okay, and basically that year was just trying to get the soil covered enough to suppress the weeds as much as possible. Then the next year, having gone in there and cut down the cover crop that was existing when I harvested the soybeans, that cover crop sprung right back up and covered the ground that next winter. And I went in there and plowed it again, which you'll see that later on in these slides. They're kind of in here a little backwards. They're the latest to the oldest in the slides here. This is actually a slide of this year.
But I'm gonna interrupt you really quick. I'm so sorry. Do you want me to go backwards?
Yeah, if you could, if that's fine. If you go all the way over to the tractors plowing, I think is the oldest picture in there. That was the planting the first year. This was me planting those soybeans. We'd worked up the ground, tried to terminate it as much as we could, but with the seed bank already in place, we were kind of struggling against that at the time. And then if you go to the next slide, nope, that's soybeans from that year. And this is the next spring. Then I ran through there and I did a deep tillage because I found out that there was a plow layer that was probably roughly 6 to 8 inches deep, and the water was basically just hitting the top of the soil and carrying the soil away with it because it had nowhere to infiltrate. So I ran this ripper through at roughly right around 2 feet deep. And that led me to the conclusion that there are a lot of rocks in there. They're not that shallow and they all came up. So then I proceeded to plow it again or disc it down, which I think is the next slide. And nope, that's planting a cover crop, but no, that's not it either. So this is me terminating that cover crop. I know there's somewhere in there. Well, anyway, so we'll just continue on with it. But so I proceeded to work up the ground. I planted corn there, and I wanted to do a study on how to use some of the different inputs to increase basically the nitrogen level in the soil was, pretty low. There was very little organic matter in it. The water was not infiltrating the soil, so I tried a lot of different things to kind of break it up. I spread manure over the whole field, which I believe that's field one, the first year I did this. And then I started incorporating more in different areas in strips about 30 foot wide. And I added humates, feather meal, bone meal, sulfate of potash, azomite, sulfur, calcium, kelp, and liquid fish. And I did it in 30-foot bands because that matched my combine, just to kind of see what my yield changes would be. Well, that just happened to be the year that we had torrential rainfalls all spring long. I'm going to venture to say that most of those products got washed away in the rain before the plant had time to absorb them. Then we went into a hard drought in July and August, and the corn crop kind of fizzled out. So then after that, I planted wheat there, harvested that. There was 92 acres total that we ended up getting certified as organic. Harvested that, did great. It was, better than average wheat yields. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, but maybe somewhere around 70 bushel an acre. And then we planted these cover crops, which are these pictures here. This is a picture of sun hemp. And sun hemp, I sourced that seed from the Brants out there at Walnut Creek. They I think they brought that in from Thailand. It is basically a tropical cover crop. In 30 to 60 days, it can grow up to 6 feet tall, sequesters about 120 pounds of nitrogen per acre when it's fully developed. And because it's a tropical plant, it won't reseed itself because we don't have a long enough growing season. As soon as the cold hits it, it terminates it. So, but it kept a lot of root structure in place. It covered the soil nicely, and really you can tell it did a lot to the soil. And now our plans going forward are the rotational grazing. So we're going to be planting a pasture out there this year, putting up a fence. And Alex pretty well covered most of the rotational grazing aspects of it. The only things I can really add to it are by rotationally grazing the animals through the pasture, you give that grass or forage crop more time to suppress weeds, build a heavier canopy. It creates more biomass per acre, and really that biomass is holding that soil structure in place. Anything that the animals don't eat, it just returns right back to the soil. And it's really one of the most, sustainable kind of types of farming that you can use just to kind of take care of that soil a little better. That's pretty much all I have, unless you have something else you wanted me to cover.
Jason,
I think that was awesome, Jason.
Oh yeah, I was recognizing that we actually didn't put in anything about the Nature Conservancy restoration. And Jason, well, both you and Alex know about that. So maybe sharing a little bit about what the plan is, because that was one of the signature projects that kind of got us interested initially. And that was, Krista is the one who got TNC interested in Jacoby Creek, but it'd be great to maybe take a few minutes to talk about that. Either Alex or Jason. Or, I mean, I can talk about it too, but Jason, you know a little bit about what they're doing.
Yeah, so basically they are doing a stream restoration project where they're going to be doing a lot of planting. There's a lot of native species of, trees, understory, and, just a barrage of plants there that they're going to plant as they kind of re-meander that stream the way it used to be. Then there towards the bottom side, the stream before it goes off the property. There was a old wetland area there where the tile that's there draining it now will be cut. The wetland will be restored back to what it used to be before it was cleared out for farming. And again, a lot of planning down in that area.
Great, thank you, Jason.
Yeah. Susan, do you want to do questions or do you want me to do some questions?
Let's see. Do we have any that have popped up?
Yeah, Lauren had a question.
Yeah, Jason, Lauren is wondering if you planted sun hemp on all of your 90 acres.
So it wasn't planted on all of the 92 acres. It was planted on 37 for the Nature Conservancy area. And then I planted a mixture of cereal rye, wheat, soybeans, and other nitrogen fixing crops for my side of it, which is like the field 1 area, the big field out on the eastern edge. And then I did that because I knew we were going to plant it in a forage crop. I didn't know if it was going to happen in the fall time or if it was going to happen in the spring. So I kind of threw what I had at it to just keep from basically spending more money than I had to after another difficult year.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. I want to talk a little bit about the soil and the plantings and soil. That first, I did do a shout out to Dave and Ann Brandt because they have been partners since we started from Walnut Creek Seeds and Brandt Farms, and we planted there. I think it was the warm season grazing mix when we first came to Agraria. We wanted to get something right in the ground. We bought it closed in May, and I think we planted in June, and so. And Jason came on, I think, the following year. But I feel like there's been a lot of interesting developments, RE soil quality, based on the work, Jason, that you've been doing in the cover crops. And I don't know if that's something that you can speak to.
Yeah, so if Alex wants to swing back through those slides a little bit again, there was a picture of 2 pieces of soil in there. Basically the soil went from almost concrete. It was just so hard that it wouldn't hold any moisture. It was very cracked, dry. There was very little nutrients in it other than phosphorus. I think it was, well, I don't remember the number off the top of my head. I just know it was extremely high. And then after basically the second year that I had been farming it, I went out in the spring and I took the sample on the right out of my field, and then the sample on the left was the field across the driveway. The field on the left there is farmed conventionally. They are non-GMO crops and they are sprayed very heavily. As you can see, there's weeds in there. There's a lot of, roots from different plants, non-crop plants, but the soil wouldn't hold any moisture. We had been 2 weeks without rain in this picture, so the soil I carried over there in a napkin because it just fell apart. And then my soil on the right there, I just stuck a knife in the ground and I came up with a worm. The soil packed into a nice ball. It was holding its moisture. And I had to clear a bunch of cover away from the top of the ground to even get to it. It was, completely covered, completely protected, and basically the soil test would show you if we had them up here, but they changed tremendously from year to year. And we were really building a bank of nutrients. And slowing the weed population down. We were knocking that seed bank way out, and it got down to just a couple little problem weeds here and there, and it's really just turned a corner really, as far as it goes.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. We're really noticing the same in the soil tests that we've done in the other fields, a big leap in soil health. I just really want to give a shout out to Jason because he's been such a great friend and partner at Agraria. And he's actually now has lots of people asking him to farm their land, including the village of Yellow Springs. He's been transitioning their land to organic as well. So I'm sure he'd be happy to hear, or maybe not happy to hear, of other people who want to work with him. But he again has been helping a lot of our neighbors as well. So I'm not sure, Alex, if it's time for Sherry or if we should ask a few more questions first.
I do think that there's one more question I actually would love to hear Jason answer, because being one of the folks who's been working with the EQIP, I know we've got a list of various species that we can plant for the pasture, but I did see that Krista had asked, what will you be planting in the pasture? What would you recommend planting in a pasture system?
There's a few different things that I would recommend. Alfalfa is number one. It just completely takes over. It takes a little bit of time to get established. It makes a huge tap root. It brings moisture up out of the ground. It sequesters so many nutrients. It will literally grow under a rock. I've seen it grow through a 30-foot tall pile of gravel that got dumped in an alfalfa field. And we dug it away, and there was a tap root all the way through that pile of gravel straight into the ground. Clover's another good one. Anything that makes a massive cover, sequesters a lot of nitrogen out of the air. It's just a big soil builder. Then you got to throw in your grasses. There's a few different things. Fescues, going to grow into your pasture whether you want it or not. There's a lot of people that will say to plant it. Some don't, just because of the problems with horses with like fescue 31. But it's still a good forage crop. It grows fast. And then there's, a handful of others that you put in there just for, nutritional value and stuff like that. But those are the main ones.
Great, thank you. And there's one more that I see from another guest regarding our compost plan. So I can pretty concisely and quickly answer that, and then we will introduce Sherry Chen after. If we do have any other questions for the earlier presenters, please feel free to keep throwing them in, because we will be able to get to those at the end. But regarding our compost plan, where will this be located? And what is the plan to ensure the location in which it is located is neighbor friendly? That's a really good question. So I think that what we're planning to do, we do have a few different composting projects on site. So we have some smaller scale demonstration spaces of, this is how you can compost at home. So there was a slide that I had shown when I was presenting earlier that just had kind of your generic compost pile where you sort of just see everything get dumped. Those typically, smaller scale side, they're typically not too smelly. I've worked as a gardener, and so I've seen a lot of people have very small, compact composting systems in their backyard, and I don't think it's really ever been an issue for an odor. For us, what we're looking at is continuing that sort of residential demonstration. We're also looking at doing something called a Johnson Sioux biocomposter, I believe is the title. And what that is there's another slide earlier that I had where you've got a system of pallets. So it's sort of a box system. You've got your pallets all into a box. You cover that with chicken wire. And then what you can do is put PVC pipes through that all of those PVC pipes will have holes poked in them, and those will really allow for oxygen to circulate throughout the system. And then you just dump your compost in. That's a really hands-off way of doing it. You don't have to turn it as often, you don't have to get in there. And because that oxygen circulating throughout the system, that decomposition happens really quickly. So all of that organic matter breaks down, and you can pull your compost out as you need it. On a larger scale, looking at sort of the class 1, 2, 3, 4 facilities in the state regulations, those are when you get into sort of the bigger scale composting. So Agraria has looked at possibly putting one of those on site. We've done a lot of research into it, and we do feel that that's very manageable for us. Since we have 128 acres, we do have one section of our property that's a little bit more isolated. We have a handful of neighbors who live out there. I think there are about 4 different houses nearby, but because it's so isolated, we don't really think that aesthetically or odor-wise it's going to be an issue. And there are different, processes as far as how you can turn your compost, and really a good indication that a good compost pile is operating efficiently is that they really shouldn't have too much odor. And so as long as you're keeping them keeping it wet, really incorporating, the right ratio of green to brown materials, and you're consistently managing and turning it over, it really shouldn't be too much of an issue. And, and for me, one of my biggest points of advocacy for composting initiatives is when we look at landfill systems and traditional waste piles, those kinds of systems are very stinky and very messy, and they're very bad for the environment. And what we've noticed is that those places are also sited in lower income communities. So we don't see a lot of landfill spaces sited in, wealthier, affluent, or white communities. They're typically in Black communities. And so kind of coming back to that concept of environmental justice, I do think it's really important that we recognize where these places are going and what neighborhoods they will be affecting. And so I think that any amount of organic waste we can divert from landfills is a good thing. And so I think that, again, it shouldn't be too much of an issue for us, but as we formalize those plans, we'd love to have you come out and see how they're developing. And then Susan, I'm gonna pass it off to you. That was our last question for now. And if you wanna do a quick introduction for Sherry, and then I'm gonna stop screen sharing so Sherry can show us her presentation, and then we'll move on to her.
Great, thanks, Alex. Yes, we're so thrilled to have Sherry Chen with us today. Sherry is the lead on a really fabulous project in Springfield called SOUP, the Springfield, Ohio Urban Plant Folk. She's been working really seriously at her own farm, and then also in South Springfield for several years, has gotten numerous community gardens up and running in South Springfield. And last year received a USDA grant, a community food projects grant, to buy a project area that she had already been working on, as well as a neighboring house. So she's going to be speaking about that grant and all the exciting things she has going on. And the reason that we are involved with Sherry is she has been on the board of Community Solutions. She has been a partner for several years. We've worked together, and Community Solutions is serving as the fiscal agent for the grant, and sort of the land trust holding the property in trust at the moment. So Sherry, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, good. I can't unmute. Thank you. Am I unmuted? Okay, cool. Thanks. And I do want to do a shout out really quick to Susan, because we have been partners with Community Solutions prior on a farm to school grant, and their hearts at Community Solutions have always been in the right place. They've been such a good support. And that is important to very tiny nonprofits like us, who can't do some of this stuff on our own while we're growing. So yeah, shout out to Community Solutions for being a fantastic partner in what we've been doing. Do I have permission to screen share, Alex?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. I've got a PowerPoint to share with you, and I'll need to put it into slideshow in the beginning. And my computer was kind of slow on PowerPoint earlier today. Wasn't quite sure why, so I apologize for that. So yeah, so South Springfield lost its last grocery store, its last full service grocery store on March 4th of last year. And then the COVID shutdown happened on March 11th. So we're working in a food desert that is pretty severe at this point in time. Who you see on the screen is myself with Joyce and Debbie. At the moment, we are soup and have been for a little while. And I tell people, you know, it doesn't look possible. When I show you the things that we do, it doesn't look possible, but it's possible because we do it small scale, and it's also possible because everything is seasonal. So we're not doing all of these things at the same time. So everything that we do is focused on food security. And as we go into these communities, I learned some time ago that, you know, this notion of white savior, it doesn't work. And I learned very quickly that what I was entering into was a space where people already had a sense of community and a sense of place, deeper and broader and more longer lasting than I'd ever heard in a lot of my white circles, where it was more of an academic concept. These people have been so intertwined to support one another for so long, and they've lived in their neighborhood for a few generations. So they really, really have a really strong sense of community and a sense of place. So we just are kind of bringing food in, and it really is coming in and going, you know, bringing resources and saying, what do you want to do? What do you need? And so you can think of it as slow community. We're looking at quality versus quantity or speed. And we look to build on ongoing relationships, and we always have to kind of keep an eye on sustainability. We do function within the community. We work with schools and churches a lot, because that's where people already are. That's where their support systems are. And then we've also looked at providing several different ways to come to food and to learn about food, because what I've noticed there is that not only does not everybody want to garden, not everybody can. You know, again, we're in a place where people have a lot of health conditions, and I've been around a lot of people that can't garden. And everybody's been in the grocery store for so long that they don't see why they might want to do this. So we had done other things. Well, you'll see some of the stuff that we've done with regard to food. Really, really important that people learn by osmosis. We have, you know, I have not gone in going, you need to learn how to grow seedlings in a greenhouse, or you need to learn how to do this. We go in and we all work together. And then if something comes up that's relevant at the moment about soil, about composting, about seedlings, when to plant, etc., we just learn all together at that moment. So, and everybody gets to have choices of what they do. Real believer and go where the need is. I put this slide in here because I thought that somebody drowning was a really good example. Like, you don't stand on the dock and go, come on over here and I'll throw you a life preserver. You go where the person is to do your work. So we're really real believers in that. You go where the need is. So we are embedded in the neighborhood, and we stay very focused on that. The only thing that we do that is not on the south side is the use of an older greenhouse that we lease. It happens to be on the north side of town, but it's a phenomenal resource, so we go for it. I am hitting my button and it's not progressing. Oh no, why is it not working? I apologize. We'll see.
Is it just taking a while to load?
I think so. And
There it is.
I have it here. Okay, we're good, I think. One of the things that we do is that we, under the Farm to School grant, we help get a couple more school gardens going, and we do support these gardens. We do provide them with seedlings and seeds. We are in 5 school gardens, all of them. One is a middle school, and the others are elementary or early childhood. So trying to get more of that established in South Springfield. I think I'll just start hitting this a little bit before I want it to load. Not quite sure why it's acting like that. So we are at, you're seeing Perrin Woods, which is on the right side. That garden's been there for 5 years, operates as a community garden. And actually more as a community garden than as a school garden. And the sunflowers are there too. The arches on the left are at a early childhood center, and when we go into a school garden or to a school that wants to garden, instead of just going in with a package deal, go in and say, how do you want to use your space? You know, because we had a school a couple years ago that said, we just want to beautify the courtyard. We just want perennials. We don't want to grow food. We want a beautiful place to teach. So, but most of the other ones are growing food. School of Innovation is the top slide there when we were putting in some new boxes. And then the other pictures are from Hayward Middle School. COVID's interfered with a lot of stuff. We were doing a garden and after school garden club there, for 4 years. Didn't do it last year because I just wasn't sure how to do it COVID style. And so hopefully we'll get everything back up and going again next year. We do have 2 lots in town where we are converting empty lots to small community gardens. This one started out, the slide in the lower left. Oh, there we go. It's just going ahead doing its own thing now. I'm so sorry. There, oh my gosh. I'm going to see if I can get it to go back. I'll talk about the slides that you see, but I'm going to have to jump back. I'm so sorry that my computer's not helping me out. Oh, Sherry. Apologies. So this, we are focused on, this is another part of our connection with community solutions, is the fact that we are, you know what I'm going to do? Is it okay if I go back to my original? I'm going to stop the share and I'm going to go back to doing it without, where I have more control over it, if that's okay with you guys.
Thank you, Sherry.
Yeah, it's just, let me just escape that. So our connection with community solutions, another dimension of that that's working, not only because of their regional outreach and their support of smaller nonprofits and their focus on doing some things also in urban areas, but also we are looking at using permaculture practices and soil regenerative practices in what we are doing. And we are also partners with Central State Extension. And so we are doing some soil testing, and we're going to be using those practices and then retesting to see what our impact has been. So we're going to go back to community garden. I'd like to share this because we started out on this garden, had a lot of setbacks because they had not done a really good job of preparation. And you know what? Oh my gosh, why is this doing this to me? There we go. So What you're going to see in the bottom left corner is what that lot looked like when we acquired it. And what you can't see is on the other side of that car was an abandoned house. And we, in our two little lots, we were lucky for a little while to have abandoned homes right beside us, because we did some guerrilla water capturing off of those, because of course we didn't have a water source. What you see in the center, we work with David Cook at the Plastic Lumber Store very closely. I actually had dreamed up this bench and just walked into his place with a sketch, and it wasn't a good one. And this is what David came up with. We built this together. He just did a fantastic job of figuring out what materials to use, you know, the strength of them, etc. And so we have two benches there that serve three capacities for us. We needed seating. We needed some degree of shade if people were going to stay there and visit with each other. And then we also needed water. So we put water capture, shade, and seating all into one thing. And so, and we did successfully capture water, which was great, and had it to use because we couldn't start planting. The bottom right corner, what you're going to see is that we now also have plastic lumber, raised bed boxes there. We are going to be working on filling those. And this garden actually is going to become a labyrinth for people to walk. So we have a long way to go. We're planting perennials as the divider. The beds are the dividers and the grass is the pathway. So we got a ways to go, but it's coming along, and we're excited about it. But I think we've been working on this for 3 or 4 years. It's been quite a while. So this is the other one. This was already done by the land bank. And we are just kind of basically keeping it up. However, we guerrilla water captured off of this house too. And then 2 summers ago, it burned down, which kind of set us back a little bit, because like the trees and some of the plants on the house side kind of got overheated. And so now there's just an empty property beside it. I think sometimes some of the things that you get into are just so interesting. You know, it's just never the same. No day is ever the same. And actually what's sweet is at this site, you know, like we had a guy that is bringing stuff over, like putting up a little card table, and somebody put a Christmas tree up a couple years ago. It was so sweet. And, you know, we don't make any judgments about it. We just go, come on in. So another thing that we did last year, really spontaneously after the Kroger and COVID incidences, that we did porch garden project. And we planted 400 bags of garden vegetable plants, cucumbers, peppers, tomatoes, lettuce, and it was hot peppers and sweet peppers. And then worked with Ashley Shearer, who was at the health department doing the community health, Creating Healthy Communities grant. And she helped us out a lot, some with funding and some with the background organization. People signed up through a Google number, and then we had a drive-through pickup where people got to take home 4 bags of their choice to go home and have a little porch garden. We're improving things this year. Some of that wasn't successful for people. We're kind of, you know, working some of the bugs out. Increasing our planting to 500 bags this year, and very excited that we're working with a Black owned and operated nonprofit on the South Side to do a simultaneous distribution at their site on South Yellow Spring Street, while we're also doing the distribution at the greenhouse. So we are really excited about that we're getting to do a South Side distribution. And it was surprised us. It was really popular. It went really well. We didn't expect that. So we went, okay, we'll repeat it this year, and we're, you know, figuring out how to do that. I mentioned that we are looking at soil building. The other thing that is critical in an urban area, especially Springfield, because of its industrial, it's got a heavy duty industrial history. And in fact, Springfield at one point in time was kind of like the industrial capital of the US, which is pretty amazing when you look at it now. But there are heavy metals in the soil. There is a lot of lead. And at this site, we haven't had to worry about that. This is the McCain site, which we're going to be able to purchase. But when you're talking about some of these other places, the school garden sites, because a lot of those are prior demolition sites, when you're looking at the other 2 lots that we are working on, prior demolition sites, they had houses on them, probably with lead paint. We do get lead testing done, but in those other areas where we know that there's probably heavy metals in the soil and there is lead, we go above ground. We just have to go into raised beds. Here at the McCain site, we don't have to do that. The lead levels were almost non-existent here. It is not prior demolition site. So, so it's just something that always has to be paid attention to. So we've learned a lot about lead safe practices, which is great, which has been just wonderful. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the fact that we do neighborhood farm stands. We have, gosh, our Perrin Woods stand is going into its 5th year. That's sited on the grounds of Perrin Woods Elementary School. And is this bar right here of people in you guys' way?
Nope.
It's not. Okay, good. So then we opened one 3 summers ago. We opened an additional stand at the School of Innovation over on Selma Road. And that ran for 2 summers. And then last year, because we had to do things COVID style, we had to take all of our infrastructure and set it up in a long line. So we collapsed down to 1 farm stand last year, went ahead and ran it COVID style at Perrin. And it worked out. It worked out, which was great. We do have a partnership with a rural produce farmer here in Clark County. We purchase his seconds. Sometimes we purchase his firsts or some auction stuff if we need it to get the food into the neighborhood. We are not, you know, we want as much local food as we can get, but the focus is let's get fresh food into the neighborhood. So if it comes from, you know, the Bainbridge auction, we're not crying too much about that. We know at least it's regional and we're okay with that. And people are happy to get the food, definitely. And we have so much fun. This is such a community event. It is so fun. It's a place where people just come together and, you know, how's your grandkids? How you cooking that? And it's beautiful to sit back and watch. Our cooking and food preservation classes kind of got put on hold again because of COVID. We were doing those in 2 neighborhood churches. We were doing a summer food preservation class in 1 church. And most of that was about a lot of preservation, you know, dehydration, canning, fermenting, etc. Our winter classes were done in a different church. And we called those Grow What You Eat, Eat What You Grow. And we would just ask people, what do you want to learn how to cook? And it's so funny because there's not always a good sense of seasonality with these folks. And somebody wanted to do rhubarb one winter. So I was like, man, where am I going to get rhubarb? You know, we go ahead and do it. You know, we don't go, that's not in season, so you can't do that. No, you learn by osmosis. You don't go in and hit people over the head with, you know, heavy duty, you know, you can't do this because we have to stick to this rigid format. So we cooked, we made strawberry rhubarb pie, and people learned how to make pie crust, and they're just wonderful events. And we include children and things when anybody can bring their kids and grandkids when we do those things. So let's see, I think the next thing that you're going to see, is about education. We had under the farm to school grant, we created something called a garden science curriculum, and we have lesson tubs that the after school garden program, after school, if the schools have a garden club in their after school program, they can use these garden science tubs. The Hayward Garden Club, which is all of these pictures here, we just did all kinds of things. The kids on the right upper corner are creating a compost bin out of a plastic trash can. We cooked a lot with those kids. They are, in the bottom left, they're in the museum. I'm not going to remember this woman's name, but she does phenomenal stuff with recyclable and trash materials. Stitzline, I think her name's Michelle Stitzline. And she had a display at the Museum of Art. And not only did we go visit, but we also created our own artwork, which is there. That kind of funny thing that you see there. We created that and sent it into a contest that they had. And the bottom right is a worm tube that is in one of their beds. So we just have done so many different things. And what we're going to head into next is the fact that we do our own seedling production at the big greenhouse that we lease. And and so there it goes. We send those seedlings. We do that for Porch Garden Project. We do it for our plant sale. We do it for school gardens, and we do it for the McCain site, our production garden. And this year, in cooperation with Community Solutions, another really exciting thing, we have 2 African-American women who are engaging in a beginning farmer grant with Community Solutions, and it is a regional effort. And we are so excited about that. So excited about that. So we're also supporting their ability to grow things. On the left, you'll see just what it looks like once we really get going in there. And we start our own sweet potato slips. You'll see some of those efforts there. We had upper right, we had someone give us a little glass greenhouse free for the taking down out of their backyard. So that is a greenhouse inside of a greenhouse. And so we're using that for seed starting. We just got that back together. It's taken us like over a year to get that reassembled and all the glass in place and all that kind of stuff. But we're real excited to use that this year. And something else that we did on any kind of a usable scale first time is there on the bottom. You see the pots that are planted. Those are a collection of kale, collards, chard, Asian greens, and winter lettuce that we grew this winter in the greenhouse. And then our greenhouse crew got to come in like once a month and harvest. So that went really well. And that stuff still looks fantastic and it still tastes good. It's going to get bitter pretty soon because the greenhouse is starting to heat up, but it was delicious. And so now I'm going to talk about the next thing that's going to pull up is going to be the production garden that we do on the McCain property. It is 7.5 acres of gorgeous green space, again, lead-free. There is a pretty dilapidated barn there. It's owned by a Southside church who was going to use it to grow, or no, I'm sorry, to like grow their church, but they decided not to go there, not to use the property. So we've been using it, but there's also a home there, and I thought I had put a slide on here where you might be able to see it in the background, but it looks like I didn't include it after all. Oh, yeah, it's in the next slide. So there's a house on this property. It's actually owned separately, and we are going to purchase the house as well. So this is kind of what that space looks like. We do have predation. In the bottom slide, you'll see that we did put up a fence. It's not been entirely effective. We have groundhogs and deer. Part of this, a very small part of this, is wooded. And so that's just something we have to work out there. The beds are laid out with permaculture principles in mind. We identified the direction that the water was sheeting off the land. The beds are in the low spaces, the low undulations of the land, and they are perpendicular to the water flow. We use deep mulch there, and we usually water our transplants in. Of course, we're planting in spring when we're getting rains, but we have not watered there for the last 4 years. We can't water there. We don't have access to water. So we've had to use some other principles there. I'm sure that the plants could use some more water. There's no doubt about that, but they haven't died, which has been pretty amazing. So next shot, you're gonna see, I'm gonna talk a little bit about the importance of land ownership. I think people that have gardened in urban areas understand that if you just get to use a place, that you can lose it at any moment. In fact, it'll be 3 summers ago this year when we just drove up and there was a for sale sign on this property. Nobody told us. And luckily it didn't sell. We were really lucky. So it is, and that's another thing that Community Solutions has been willing to kind of enter into with us, is kind of like a temporary land trust kind of an entity, because we haven't been able to, we aren't big enough to own these things ourselves really and manage. I mean, we are taking care of it, but in terms of all the legalities, we haven't been big enough. You can see the house, a portion of the house on the bottom picture. Bottom picture, far right side is where that little house is. So we are purchasing the house, and the garage is on the property and the 7.5 acres. So we will keep going. So I'm going to talk next about, we're close to done. I'm going to just talk about the Community Food Project grant really quick. Oh, there it is. Wow. It is a 4-year grant, and really what it's going to allow us to do is to really expand all the dimensions of what we're doing. You'll see in the red box, these are the things that are the focus of the grant. Land ownership, we're going to purchase the property. Food production is going to be expanded. We'll be planting brambles and fruit trees, increasing the vegetable growing space, installing chickens for eggs. And then we're also going to put in a hoop house for season extension. Food access programming, we like to add a 3rd farm stand to our neighborhood farm stands. And then I believe it's in year 2, start a veggie box program, which would be a very modified CSA-ish kind of a program where people can get a regular box of, just pick up a regular box of vegetables. And education, again, Central State University Extension is also an absolutely wonderful partner in this grant. They are doing some education pieces. We've also partnered with Clark County Public Library and have begun to initiate some things. We're doing something, a small series of food films right now. And then another person who's associated with us is doing a little Zoom into gardening program. And so I wanted to mention our collaborators. We have a lot of grant collaborators, Community Solutions, Central State University Extension being the 2 major ones. And then we had a lot of minor collaborators, the library. We're working with the School of Innovation Community Learning Center, and 1159 South is the Black-owned and operated nonprofit that I mentioned. And then I just put the others down there just to be polite, but I won't drag you through all those acronyms. I just wanted to, at least, if somebody recognized any acronyms, I wanted them to be there. And so we'll go through these last few. We have a blast, and these people are some of my best friends on the planet. I can tell you that right now. We dearly, dearly love each other. And we hardly see each other over the winter, and it's always such a long time. We have a lot of fun. This is some veggie people and hot dog people we made with the kids once at one of the garden events. And I found this and I thought that it was so precious because it kind of reminded me of some of the focus of how I feel about this. Promise me that you will not spend so much time treading water and trying to keep your head above the waves which is what I see a lot of people doing, that you forget, truly forget how much you have always loved to swim. I mean, that kind of breaks my heart. And I really feel like that's kind of part of how we're coming to this. So what we're trying to do, you've heard that thing, teach a person to fish instead of just giving them a fish. But I'm hoping as a result of teaching people to fish, that they do get to swim. And hopefully we'll get to my last slide. Thank you so much for your patience. Here's the last one. That's all, folks. Thank you so much. And I'll stop my screen share.
Thank you so much, Sherry. That was really awesome. I'd love to, I see a few questions in the chat. I did want to give a shout out also to Central State University, whom you mentioned as an important partner for you, and they also are for us. We have Marcus Nagel on the line. I don't know if he wants to show himself, but for those of you who don't know Central State, it's a HBCU, historically Black university, just down the road from Springfield and from us. And they have a lot of new extension officers who are really doing fabulous work. And Marcus is a horticulture professor there. Did you want to say anything, Marcus? Sort of caught you off guard outside. But anyway, we really are thrilled about our relationship with Central State. They've been doing great work.
Mhm.
I see a question here from Larissa Crockett of the churches that you're partnered with in Springfield. I think it's probably more than the two that she's asking about, but maybe talking a little bit about those church partnerships.
Oh, right. So Southgate Baptist was where we did our summer preservation classes. Second Baptist Missionary Church was where we did our winter classes. And I gotta say that we are beginning to have connections with others, although not quite to that level of having something in their church. And by the way, the property is owned by Tridestone Baptist. So those are the three that we have the closest associations with right now, but we have others that are just developing around the edges, because part of what goes on in Springfield is that a lot of these little churches are doing food pantries. And so we're kind of starting to connect around the edges to some of that kind of stuff as it's relevant.
Great, thanks, Sherry. There's also a question from Lauren asking if it was difficult to get students to sign up for the garden club.
I don't think it was ever difficult for them to sign up, and I didn't manage that, the school did. I just kind of showed up and said, who is it? Who's here? What was really interesting though, was that we would start the year with 7 or 8 kids almost consistently, and it would whittle down to about 2. And some of that was because, kids had no idea what we were getting into. And we did have fun, but we had parents who would go, you just got in trouble for whatever, so you're not allowed to go to any of your clubs. We had some kids that joined other clubs. We had some kids that didn't have a way, they'd go, I got to walk home from school today and it's like pouring down rain. I'm not staying for garden club. There's all these extenuating factors that we had to take into consideration. So yeah, it was always a mishmash, and it always kind of ended up that way. And it was just interesting. It was just kind of hard to keep them.
Thanks, Sherry. I'm going to ask this question from Alex, and then Alex, I want you to maybe talk a little bit about how people can support the generous gardeners and the move to Springfield. But Alex has a question in the chat here. Do you think there are opportunities for community gardens to partner with municipalities to work on acquiring land, and any suggestions on how to promote these efforts? And again, I think that we all know that land access is a huge issue for both rural and urban farmers. And I did want to mention RE, the Black Farming Network, that within the latest COVID relief bill, there's, I think, $4 billion for Black farmers who have really suffered under lots of lots of circumstances with the USDA and redlining and on and on. So there is some relief in sight. But what about land access for folks in urban areas? Sherry, what would you recommend?
Part of what I hear a lot of times, I love it that there's this focus, and I've heard people even in my community go, just start a community garden there, you know, on these empty lots. Springfield's got a lot of empty lots. And I want to go, you need to take the word just out of that, because going into a space that has been a prior demolition space that that has any kind of heavy metal issue. So for one thing, testing for lead, for example, we can get done for free at the health department. It does not include any of the other heavy metals that might be in that soil. And when we acquired one of our lots, you could hardly get a shovel an inch into the soil because they had not capped it with 6 inches of topsoil like they were supposed to. And thank goodness we were under a grant. At the time, I had to have 18 cubic yards of soil brought to that site. Otherwise, I'm not sure what we would have done. When you go into gardening in raised beds, they need to be watered more often. Oftentimes you don't have a water source. You have to pay for those boxes and the soil that goes in them. It limits the amount of space you can grow in because you can't use that whole lot. So there's a whole lot that goes into these urban spaces, which is why if you can find spaces like we found at McCain, those are gems. You got to jump on them, which is why we jumped on this grant. That's what's key, I think, is to pay attention to what kind of resources are coming to the table to help do this.
Great, thank you, Sherry. Alex, did you want to talk a little bit about how folks can support SOUP, at least through the Generous Gardeners piece?
Yeah, definitely. So for those of you in the community or outside of the community, last year, you know, one of the things that I think globally we all really noticed was the movement toward gardening and towards, you know, folks growing more at home. And I think that was one of the few really positive things that has come out of COVID. And so what we realized through that is how can we, you know, help sustain that and make it truly a network and not simply just a trend or a movement that dies off. And so we wanted to make sure that we were trying to promote those efforts. And, you know, for like me, when I first started gardening, I wasn't very good at it. And so it is a really easy thing to become discouraged if you don't have the resources, if you don't know what you're doing. And so we wanted to promote education and those resources in a very hyper local way. And so kind of like I said earlier, when, you know, we remember, well, I don't remember, I wasn't alive, but the victory gardens, you know, and during the war when people were able to share food because they couldn't get it elsewhere, and you could go to your neighbor and get their tomatoes, you could share your lettuce with them. And kind of coming back to what Sherry was saying, it's really that kind of intersection of community, and it's a really good way. And Sherry, I'm gonna forget what language you used, but I really appreciated that on your first slide where you didn't say we're building community. We're doing something else to help really stimulate and integrate it. And so I love that concept of, you know, we're not here to build something, we're here to help promote what's already happening and to really encourage people to continue doing that. So the Generous Gardeners program was started with a group of volunteers right around the time when everything shut down last year. And what we've done is we've started a newsletter. So we've been every 2 weeks getting a small newsletter out that's just very, very local, regional information about, you know, this is what you plant this week, this is what you should get ready to harvest, these are your next steps for your garden, and then just kind of fun facts and interesting stories included in there. And one of the big projects, in addition to that newsletter, is the acquisition of food that's local and getting that back into some community members' hands. And so, like Sherry said, you know, she's happy, and many folks are happy to just kind of, you know, to go out and hit up the auction if they need to, or find food that's regionally produced. One of those things that we want to do is to help promote that and to make sure that we are, when possible, if we have donations that come in for food procurement and food acquisition, we want to make sure that when we can, if we can, putting that money back into farmers' pockets. So we're kind of keeping that slow food cycle going and that slow food movement going by putting the money we have into the pockets of farmers who are then growing the food that then goes back into the community, and just kind of continuing that on and on. And so, so for anyone who's interested in learning more about the Generous Gardeners program, we both accept homegrown donations. So we will gladly accept the foods you produce if you have an abundant harvest, or financial donations as well. So if you want to donate a little bit of money, that money would go directly into purchasing local food that would then go back to local people.
Great, thank you so much, Alex. I'm going to call again on Marcus. And Marcus, we do have, I noticed, some homeowners and farmers on the line. If you can speak a little bit to Central State Extension and the some of the things that the college is able to offer farmers, or some of the work that you're involved in, because I know you're also involved in some research projects with local farmers.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm actually not part of the extension program, but I can just basically, describe it, that we have obviously our up and running extension program, which is growing rapidly now, especially in the last year. A lot of the regional coordinators and educators have been hired and have come online, so to speak. So we're extension-wise, we're slowly becoming present all over the state. We have different areas that are focused on mainly food, ag, and nutrition. That the program leader for that is Dr. Cindy Folk. So I believe that's probably who Sherry's been working with, although there's other programs, the home and health, that's Mary Kershaw. And there's a business, agribusiness facet, that's Dr. Anthony Barwick. And those are the program leaders. And underneath them, then there's regional agents, county agents, and now regional coordinators. There's one for Southwest Ohio, and their educators now have also been hired and are trained and starting to become more present around in the area. So I would encourage anybody that has questions to, there's a pretty good website with everyone's information there. You can go and have a look how it's organized and the contacts for those people. With respect to research, yeah, of course, like I say every time, that we are excited to partner with Community Solutions and Agraria for research, and to have research projects at Agraria. We've tried several times to get funding projects, and we've been successful a few times. So we've worked with the fate of agrochemicals in the control of invasive species, particularly the bush honeysuckle. And we have partnered also with your efforts on with the Land Grant Institute to get the perennial crops established. So I was happy to hear that there is now a planting of silphium at Agraria, and excited to be involved with looking how that progresses. And yeah, I also know that you've submitted for an equipment grant for the composting. That's also very exciting, and something very true to my heart. So hopefully that comes through, and we'll see composting operations at Agraria, and Central State Research will also be involved in supporting that.
Great, thank you so much, Marcus. Yeah, we really love working with you and your colleagues, and are really thrilled to see the Extension Service get up and running in such an exciting way. And I would encourage anybody who is a farmer or a gardener to have a look at the Extension website that Marcus mentioned, just to see if they're just to get contacts for particular extension agents. Why don't we take one last question for Jason. Jason, if you're still here, Lauren is asking, what do you do with your harvested soybeans, rye, hemp, etc.?
So the first year, I basically took those soybeans, sold them to a broker in Kentucky, and then they were never heard from again. Now I actually work a lot with Bluegrass Farms out of Jeffersonville with my soybeans. My corn goes to Upper Sandusky up to Calmback Feeds. And then I also keep some in-house just to feed my animals. Any of the rye, specialty crops, anything like that. There's actually an organic grain exchange that I've been working with. They sell large lots of organic grains. Tried to set up a few things with a couple different processors. I've worked with some breweries, different things like that to get some organic grains in. So basically a wide range of marketing, but I try and keep it as locally as I can. But just the mass amount of acres that I farm now, it's almost 700 organically, that I just the local market just can't absorb that much. So I do have to ship some out.
Well, I'm glad you're selling it. Thank you. Thank you very much, Jason. I'm going to turn it over to Lauren in 1 second to talk about what's happening next weekend. But I did want to thank again all the presenters and staff and friends and all the folks who joined us here this morning. It is really an auspicious time for us, and we're all getting spring fever at Agraria. Lots of good things happening here. So if you're interested in coming out, there are opportunities listed on the website, and we're also happy to just have folks stop by. We're here every day, so, or every weekday, I should say. So would love to see you on Agraria. Alex or Rachel, do you have anything else you'd like to say before I turn it over to Lauren or Sherry or Jason?
No, I'd just like to say thank you all for coming. This has been really been a pleasure. Thank you. And to all the speakers today too.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. All right, Lauren.
Hello, well, thanks. So next weekend on Saturday at 1 o'clock again, we'll have 2 representatives from Natural Resource Conservation Service with us, including our new district conservationist, and she'll be speaking about how you can sign up for their various cost share programs. She'll also be touching on how new and beginner farmers, or the resources they have available for new and beginning farmers. And they'll also be talking about our specific regional conservation partnership program, which has provided funding for various projects at Agraria and other local farms, and also just the role of those regional conservation partnership projects across the country, and what they can provide for communities. And then after those presentations, we'll have a professor of soil science and agronomy from Central State University, and he'll be speaking on monitoring the soil and water quality outcomes of conservation practices. And he's done soil testing on all the projects that have received conservation funds through our regional conservation partnership program in our area. And he's done work throughout Southwest Ohio, and it'll be really great to hear from him because he's highly motivated and is doing lots of great work. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Lauren. And thanks, Krista, to our wonderful TLT partners, and to everybody who joined us today. Thanks, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.